All right, guys. To my phenomenal student people who have just, I started the website over a year ago, and then I just now recently started releasing my first couple of episodes of the particular show. And if you're looking on the YouTube channel, this is probably going to be the second piece of content that I put out. But I want to do, I guess, what I'm calling, since we are the phenomenal student, phenomenal webinar. It's all about branding, people. So I changed my name here. I'm going to explain the Bloom word study routine that I started this year. Sadly, I didn't get a chance to finish it the way I wanted to because of COVID-19. I was able to do it digitally or virtually, I guess, as we're doing now. A lot of the materials or things that you could do over that platform. So that's kind of where it could be beneficial even still now. Probably not to the level you would want, because I think you can't do a lot of the tactile and kinesthetic activities that come along with it unless they do it at home. But it's still not the same as kids being able to collaborate with each other, which is something that's considered highly research-based. So I would say we get started. So today joining me is a friend of mine. Her name is Kerstin Owen. This year she'll be teaching kindergarten. At the past couple of years, what did you teach first grade the past couple of years?
Yes. Well, last year I taught first grade, and then the year before that I taught second grade.
So she's for those who don't, that may be listening, are just parents or people that don't understand education. K through is what we consider primary. In a sense, you may hear a lot of days nowadays people talk more about the testing grades and state testing, but primary is where a lot of the foundational work, which I discovered this past year teaching second grade, where a lot of the key work is done that sets it up. So it was a very important grade, and her teaching kindergarten, that's that foundation, because the kids get that foundation. And through a lot of research I've done this summer, that time where kids learning letter, sound, correspondence, and things like that, you'll be amazed that even some kids will get to second grade and maybe even older and don't even know their letter sounds. I didn't even realize that until I started saying, wow, so kids can come out of kindergarten and understand those concepts. Then, you've done your job for one, but of course you can advance them past that stage. But I've talked enough, so let's kind of get down to it. So what I'm going to be explaining today is my Bloom's word study routine. I was able to achieve tremendous results with it. My kids were able to decode, their vocabulary increased, and they were able to be, most of them, proficient spellers, even by the time that we went into our, I guess, COVID-19 quarantine and having to teach virtually. All right, so I'll start by projecting the slide. I guess I was already a little bit farther down. So Bloom's word study. So it's adding rigor to a new approach. So the new approach is word study. And a lot of people, it's research-based, that's because the reason that word study is probably more optimal instead of our traditional spelling, and which is I'm going to get to, is because kids being able to interact with words in many different fashions instead of just doing a rote spelling list or just doing phonics or just explicit vocabulary instruction. They get to interact with the words in many ways, and it does help with the retention of spelling, because some of it's just common sense. If you're doing something, some routine where you're seeing the words 2 to 3 times a day in different contexts, it's just natural that you'll learn the pattern, and then you're getting that repetition. So Bloom's word study is adding rigor to a new approach. All right, so what is Bloom's word study? Bloom's word study is a merging of 2 unique approaches: Bloom's taxonomy and word study. And I'm going to explain what Bloom's is, and then what word study is. All right, Bloom's taxonomy. Excuse me if I'm going a little fast. So Bloom's taxonomy, it's a 6-level matrix. First I'll start out. So Kerstin, what is like your understanding of Bloom's, and how have you seen it used in the classroom in your career?
Basically, Bloom's is what I use Bloom's for, is for creating lesson plans. I know that the analyzing part is where they're doing most of the work. Like, they're generating the answers, they're they're doing more partner work, more group work.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas like the beginning, or the remembering, or the understanding would be the being able to recall a vocabulary definition.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. Honestly, you kind of set it up perfectly. And like, And the reason I use this, I've been kind of experimenting the last 2 years and really not just experimenting, using the Bloom structure for everything that I do. I hadn't really been able to do it to the full level of writing. Just want to do it in the forthcoming year. But I've done it for reading, and I've seen tremendous results with that of kids being able, as you said, being able to interact with things on their, doing things more on their own, being able to evaluate, being able to create. And the thing is, how do you create that for a word study? But here, just for those who are listening, the stages, and Kerstin explained it perfectly. You have remembering, understanding, applying, analyzing, evaluating, and creating. So remembering is basic recall. And even with reading, recall is almost like just doing basic retelling, which is kind of what I use the Bloom structure for in reading. But understanding is where you know that the kids, is literally what it says. They understand what they're being taught. But that doesn't mean they know it to the highest level. That just means they can basically say, this is what the pattern is, or this is what the main idea is, this is what the problem solution is. But when you step to that next level of applying, that means you can apply it in a different context or some type of new way. That doesn't mean it's the highest rigor, though. This means you can do something differently. And I'll explain how you use that with words, and then analyzing when you look at something, being able to analyze. Where we think of it as teaching when you teach reading is a concept like inferring. That's analyzing, because you got to think of the whole passage or story, and being able to infer and think about why somebody did something. And then evaluating is when you state like a position or you have like an opinion on something. That's where you see argumentative writing. And essentially, if you take this to a real world context, that is when, so say for example, when you see a lot of us watch sports commentators, or we watch movie reviews or things like that, people are evaluating. They're looking at it and stating their opinion, and they're giving facts as to why it is. And then the highest level is creating, or I like to use the word synthesize. It's when you create your own thought process based off the information that you're getting. So that's kind of the levels you want to take the kids to. But for the most part, you can't they have to start here, because to be able to create and evaluate, you have to know basically what you're evaluating. So you have to take them through the stages. But if you do it organically through a scaffold, they'll be able to do it. So I was able to do that with word study. So next time, to explain what word study is. It encompasses 3 different things: decoding, encoding, which is spelling, and vocabulary instruction. So phonological awareness, for those that don't know, is a broad skill that includes identifying, manipulating units of oral language. So basically sounding out words. You want to just break it down to language terms. Like we hear cat, like C-A-T, cat. Like that's basically, and those are probably smaller levels like phonemes, but multi-syllabic words, that's decoding. That's normally what word study is. And then phonics, spelling, that's us being able to spell. Now, when we grew up, a lot of us would do spelling lists. So, Kerstin, I'll ask, and even before I get to the next slide, so what did you traditionally do when you were a kid, as far as like when it came to words? And so did y'all do sounding out words, or was it just spelling lists? Or I don't remember much myself getting a lot of vocabulary instruction. So what did they do when you were younger when it comes to dealing with words?
So with me, the approach of reading basically was whenever I was in first grade, 2 weeks to the end of the school year, my teacher told my parents that I couldn't read and that I was going to flunk. Mm-hmm. So I went to summer school. I had the same reader as I had during the year. Mm-hmm. So I basically memorized words. Right. I didn't learn phonics until after I graduated college, and I started teaching myself in order to teach my kids.
Now, what Kerstin, through my research this summer, I've been doing a lot of it myself. I think basically what you probably are describing is what they call the look-say method, or the whole language approach, like memorizing words. So let me guess, they ask you to look at the pictures and everything around it to try to say words.
Yes.
I don't know. So that will be what
Show
they
me a word list, go over the words. Basically all I did. I didn't learn phonics. I knew the basic sounds as a kid. Like I said, in order to be able to teach it, that's whenever I really dove in and was like, okay, this is how I break the word apart in order to teach my kids.
So, and that's why it's so important. And I didn't understand that myself. As you say, I probably never learned. I think I knew about phonics, even before I got, down to a lower grade level. But you see how important, because some kids don't know what the letter sounds are, or some kids don't know what how to sound out, what a diphthong is, what these things are. And somebody like yourself, and I spoke to a coworker the other day, and they shared similar things, a similar concept, that they didn't know how to break down words piece by piece and do phonics until they got to college or older. But it's kind of sad, but that's, I'm 35 and we're close to the same age. So it's kind of, and it's not to get opinionated on a webinar, but it's a lot of the same practices are still kind of in place today with a lot of people, that a lot of people aren't teaching phonics. There's still more of that whole language approach. And this isn't to get on that, but, so just to kind of pull this back more to this webinar. Phonics spelling, and it's a method of teaching to read by correlating sound with letters or groups, letters in an alphabetic writing system. So basically spelling, phonics, that's what that is. And then, because even as teachers, it's kind of hard to understand what phonics and all the difference between phonemic awareness and phonics, and it all kind of runs together until you kind of get into it and you kind of understand it a little bit better. Then you have vocabulary instruction. There are a lot of people, especially in the older grades, the explicit teaching of words, seen in text, in certain content areas. Because you have tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 words. We have different types of words that you learn. Because a lot of times what's the most difficult part for kids is, and sometimes adults, is the fact that a lot of the words that sometimes are used on state tests or sometimes in vocabulary is words that people just don't use on an everyday basis. I can remember being at a training, and one of the trainer, Nancy Motley, a tremendous educator, she said that, she was at home. How many times you're about to get dinner for your kids and you're like, which thing best represents what you want for dinner? Like, who talks like that? You know what I'm saying? People don't use these words, but kids see it in the text that they read and on state tests and these word problems and things like that. So that's what makes it so difficult sometimes. All right, let's move on. So now, and we already kind of talked about it, but in most classrooms, these skills are taught in 1 of 3 ways. You got to learn like phonics, or I should have said phonological awareness. So sounding out words. People normally just do one, or they do spelling, the traditional, as a lot of us grew up with the traditional spelling list, which I did when I was a kid, or people just do explicit vocabulary instruction. But you very rarely see the 3 being merged. Now, the question you may have is, how do you merge the 3? So I guess I'll tell you. All right, how do you merge Bloom's and word study? Because it's about that rigor matrix while at the same time doing word study. All right, so first, I'm just going to explain it through the process that I went through. So it's on a 5-day cycle. Some do 6 or longer when it comes to doing their word study cycle. So on my first day, and you can mix it up a little bit, but the first day is going to pretty much look fairly similar, just depending. All right, so day 1, phonological awareness. You're going to teach the sound or like the word. I'm a higher energy person, so when I start off, I call it word power. So I'll jump up on a table and go, what everybody kids word power, and then we'll go through the 10 to 15 words that I chose for that particular week. And then we'll say the words. Kids love it. It's high energy. It kind of gets them immediately engaged, and it's a great way to start the week. Kids just automatically in the process of learning, but you still want to teach the basics, but then they'll be engaged in the same time. Now, this is the area I actually even want to get a little better in. You teach the sound. So say, for example, you're doing vowel teams and you're doing the EA pattern or long E. So you might go, remember guys, when you have 2 vowels, when 2 vowels go walking, the first one does the talking. You can use those little teaching points. So that's what you can do at that point. You kind of go through each words and model that. So that'll be your phonological awareness. This stuff don't take that long. You're talking about 5 minutes at the most. And even when I do word power and I say the words, it takes 2 minutes at the most. So some of these things don't take the longest. And I would say that first day you could do it in 25 minutes, but it wouldn't be the worst idea to expand it to 30 minutes, considering how important words are, especially at the lower levels. Now, next you will have phonics. Now, everything doesn't have a traditional spelling rule. So if you're doing short vowels, it's not going to be something necessarily where you're like, hey, remember this, this, and this. It's just a matter of knowing the sounds and knowing to remember that when you spell. But of course, once you get the vowel teams and these different converting words, so say if you're converting a Y to an I, that's where you explain spelling rules. So this is even something that you probably would do every week. So you kind of want to differentiate it depending on the week, which makes it, you can tailor things according to what might be the focus for that particular week. So say, for example, you're doing short vowels. Short vowels isn't as important as far as on the spelling tip, but vocabulary might be a focus that week. So maybe you do your activities more focused on vocabulary. So you start the week that way. So phonics, a lot of times what I have the kids do, I do voices and things of that nature. I'll go and have them come and underline the pattern, and I do voices all the time. So if it's the EA pattern or the EE pattern, they would just come and underline it. So I already get them in the mode of looking for the pattern. And then at the end, vocabulary is going to be a heavy part of that day, because a lot of research says that if kids are able, that oral comprehension or that oral language is very important. So I project a picture, and then I'll say, this reminds me of, or in this picture, then I may put the word or ask them to kind of talk out what's going on in the picture. And most of this year, I didn't actually even put the word. I just have the picture, and then have them, now that they know the words, they would kind of talk it out after I've kind of explained what the definition is. And research says, like, if you teach kids the vocabulary explicitly, which they call intentional teaching of vocabulary, and then incidentally where they talk it out or they're reading it, they have what they call impact sizes is much higher of them actually attaining or acquiring the word. So I do vocabulary trailers, which is a technique I learned from Joanne Billingsley at a training, and she has it in her book, Vocab Magic or Vocabulary Magic. It's an excellent technique. And this is after, honestly, I already been doing the routine for a while, and I was just intentionally teaching the vocabulary. But Miss Billingsley, she's dyslexic, and she told me that you have to introduce the pictures, the visuals early to the kids. So I switched up what I was doing early after the first probably 6-7 weeks of doing this routine, which I didn't start until the second 9 weeks. So
I have a quick question.
Go ahead.
Sorry. On the phonics part, when you said that you're having them identify the reading pattern, do you show it in books, like have them look in a book and try to find the reading pattern?
No, well, that's farther along. So what I normally do is I'll have them, like, I have the words projected most time, and I have them come underline it with like a marker or something like that on that first day. I have them, so say if the word is beach and the pattern is EA, I'll come and have them underline EA on the board. So it's just a fun way to them on that first day. But I'll get to what you're talking about though. That's kind of like as the rigor kind of increases and they'll apply. But so next we go to the understanding. This is where you may do a reinforcement activity just to kind of see where they're at. So what I like to do is for phonological awareness, most time I start off with the kids themselves, one of the kids kind of leading the sounding out of the word or saying the word. So if it's beach or teach or I'll say another one, I don't want to keep using school, they would say it, and then they kind of do, because I'll say the word is school, what's the word? And then the kids will say the word, kind of like that. And it's a fun way to start off day two. The kids leading it, not me. And then I have the kids clap it out. Now you can use tap it out or anything. But so say if you're in the lower grades, you might do more the phonemic awareness part. You might break it down into the individual letters. But with older kids, they may know their individual letters or their graphemes or whatever you want to call them, the phonemes. But with older kids, you might do syllables. So you just might break it down if it's a multi-syllable word, and you have them clap it out. And my kids have even told me, even when they're spelling, one of my kids told me that they would be clapping it out in their head. So it's just that little mnemonic to learn that. And that could be quick, 5 to 6 minutes, and then you move on to the next thing. And then you can go more on this particular day. I put it just for the purpose of this phonics. I had kids do word sorts. Now, a lot of times, as the year went on, you can do more tactile things, and you can have the word list, cut it out, and then have the kids on their desk sort the words out or you can do it on a paper. That's simpler, but you can also do that as well because it's more tactile and kids get to use their hands and work in partners. Now, what I would do, sometimes have the kids sort according to the pattern, then look for more words in a book or in a dictionary, they can look for more words with that pattern. I can remember one particular time my kids actually did some pretty cool stuff with that, being able to sort of according to certain initial and final blends and diagrams. You'll see kids starting to do some cool things when you start doing things like sorts. And word sorts are probably the most research-based thing, because I don't know any book or anything that they don't talk about how word sorts are great for kids learning patterns and spelling. All right. Then, so for vocabulary, and you see all these things are separated by the number of minutes, 5, 10, all these can be done within 25 minutes, and you might have early finishers. So if you do it paper-based that day, and I do an activity called Picture It, and that's something another activity that you can get from, I think it's in Vocab Magic. No, that was actually in another book, Word Study. That sticks, because I actually have the book here. So Picture is like where you put the word and then you put a little space where the kids can draw a picture. And kids, of course, like to draw, so they can draw a picture that represents the word. And that's another way of being able to assess whether or not they understand the vocabulary word in a different way. Or you could just have context clue sentences where, you know, they put the word in the sentence. You can do both, because kids normally can do them pretty quick once they kind of get used to the routine. And I would say that too, when you're doing a routine, like you can't probably throw too much at the kids, but once they get used to it, they normally kind of speed up, are able to do it pretty quickly. At least my kids were able to do it this year. All right. So the third, and what Kerstin was talking about, and she asked a question about, the third day you could do, I feel like 2 or 3 things. I mean, 1 or 2 things, and other little activities you can do. But one thing you can do, you can assess. This is where the big thing people talk about is parents want spelling lists, so they want kids to practice their spelling. But on this day, so for phonological awareness, and it's something I plan on adding this year, kids will read and build. So you call out the word, and then kids will write the word. But I think where I want to kind of expand, and a lot of research says, let the kids, they don't have to necessarily write it with a marker. They can easily just write the word either in the air or on their desk with their hand. Not literally with the marker, but it kind of taps into some different things. This doesn't take long. So you can say the word is even build, and they would write out build. And then you do that for 5 minutes. And then phonics will be the spelling part. This is where you just basically do your spelling. You go, hey, the word is, it's a bigger word, but tremendous. The kids will spell the word, and you can walk around. And even while you're doing that, you know who your stronger spellers are and who your weaker spellers are. And then say if you got a co-teacher in there at the time, a sped teacher or someone like that, they could be walking around as well. And then you can walk around. You kind of can start seeing where the kids are having trouble with, and then you kind of can correct them as you go along. So it's that guided practice as well. But it also, they're applying their skills, and they're still getting their spelling without doing a rote spelling list at the end of the day. They're applying the skill instead of trying to memorize a word. And you can guide them along the process. And then where you can incorporate the vocabulary pieces where the kids can spell. I started incorporating spell and draw. This is something I just started doing on my own one day. They would spell the word and then draw a visual representation of it. So you can do that for 10 minutes. So you can cover, most time what I do, I give 10 words, and then I give like 5 challenge words, which are normally, so if you're 2nd grade, 3rd and 4th grade words, so they can start building that higher end vocabulary, because 2nd grade words tend not to be that high end. So that's, you can fit that all within 25 minutes. Or as you were saying, Kerstin, I know you said, do they do it in a book? There are a lot of phonics passages out there where you can, so say if the pattern is 08 or 00, there are passages you can find where kids will read the paragraph and look for the pattern, and then they have other activities associated with it. Or you can have it where a kid reads their self-selected text and they're able to go through and look for that pattern. And what you'll start seeing as you go through this process and you tell kids to do this, they'll start doing it on their own. I would have kids even be doing morning work, and they were like, oh, I just saw a control R vowel. Or when I was doing some form of what I call literary analysis, or probably closer to text analysis, I started to embed that phonics instruction with that, and kids organically start doing it, especially if you praise it. Now, if you just be like whatever to it, they might not do it, but if you start praising that, kids will try to impress you by looking for those patterns. I mean, so that's where you can start embedding it in other things. All right, so that's the application stage. Now we get to analysis. All right, analysis, day 4, which will be Thursday, obviously. Now, phonological awareness and phonics, that may not be as important on it. It just depends on the week and how you said it. Normally what I would do is I would have one station. So I have 4 different stations. I would have one station where kids may sort the words according to how they think they're different or alike. Now that could be by sound or by spelling. It's really their choice, and I want them to have free reign on that. And so that's what I normally do. So you might sort according to how they're same or different. You can have 2 stations with that or just one. And then normally on the other stations, I would have, say, normally probably have 2 stations where you would give them a picture and some words or a word and ask them to write a paragraph with it. And then as the year progresses, here's the thing where you can start incorporating it with other skills. You would, so say if we're going over drama, we've gone over a unit on drama. So after that, you would be like, hey, create a, if your word is girl, we're doing control R vowels and the word is girl, create a drama about a girl. So, or you can say, if it's info text or if it's just a regular story or a poem, you can ask them to create a poem using those words. So you learn, they use it in multiple contexts, and that incorporates vocabulary. And then they would be writing. It takes about, at first the stations are going to take a little longer, but eventually kids can do it in 3 or 4 minutes each station. And so at that point, I didn't put it on here. You would debrief and you talk about it. And my kids actually did pretty well with that, where they would actually sit and talk about what those words. It was pretty cool. Some kids creating dramas and things like that. It was always really cool. So you start seeing kids be able to do some things. But at that point, they're using the words, not necessarily trying to remember them or just sound them out. They're using the words. All right. So let's get to this. That final day is an assessment piece. Now, the question might be for those who have those tier 3 babies who are not as good at sounding out words. Majority of kids, by the time you get to the 5th day, are going to be able to sound out the words. But obviously, you know, our tier 3 babies, my SPED kiddos or maybe our dyslexic kiddos, they may not, which is under the SPED label, they may not be able to sound out the words or not as strong with it. You may not pull the other kids to sound out the words, but those are the kids you pull and say, if you have 10 core words you're testing them on, have them sound those words out and see if they know those words. So they know 70% or 80%. And then, you know, if you need to remediate or if you need to ask the SPED teacher, you know, in their small group time to work with them again on those words. Especially if it's a pattern that they need to know for their grade level. Because if you're working primary, kids don't need to know what Greek and Latin roots are. I mean, if they don't know those, I mean, they don't really have to know it until they're in 3rd, 4th, 5th grade. So that may not be something you focus as much on. But for phonics, I didn't do it as much this year, or at all this year, but kids can read a paragraph and correct the misspelled words. You see this in most books. Those spelling type books, and I know a lot of people say they don't like using those type books, but yeah, it's a timetable. So creating your own is just, it's just not worth it. You can easily find the same stuff in the book and it'll save you eons of time. Now I can say in this digital space, you can always type the stuff out and be able to send it to parents. I think that's the easiest thing to do, and then parents still get to see what you're doing as well. And then for vocabulary, which I did most of this year, the kids will read a passage and use the correct word. Now, this also incorporates using context clues. So you'll see that kids are very proficient in that skill by the end of the year because organically they're learning to do that. And then you can embed that reading instruction, context clues instruction with that weekly. Now, I don't want to speed ahead. So, Kerstin, at this point, do you have any questions?
I just wanted to point out that I had some tier 3 babies this year that couldn't write on paper pencil. Mm-hmm. So I got the magnetic letters, and whenever I would give it to the couple kids that I had, they were able to spell the word using the letters. So it was, and then transfer it to paper.
Now, she just gave me a new tip of something to do. So she's kind of giving a tip of something else you can do for, and that's the thing too, according to teachers, we have to differentiate according to those kids that may have those skills. And all that can be incorporated with a routine like this, because it's going to have kids that can't do certain things. And even some kids can't write very well. So when you get to these on the analysis day and they have to write, maybe give them a Chromebook, and I use Seesaw this year, was a great platform, or have them talk it out. Like, it makes it a little easier because some kids aren't, whether they're dyslexic or they just struggle with writing, they may not be good at writing. And honestly, even though I did it, a lot of I'd rather just listen to what they're saying, because anybody that's taught primary can tell you normally can't make out half of it. So it's almost frustrating to teach writing because you normally can't understand most of it. Now, what I would do on this day, this assessment day, this 5th day, I would put a synthesize. Now, this isn't gonna always, so say if you have kids that are not gonna be able to finish the whole, only can get through the story, that's fine. They don't have to do the synthesize that week. But most time, a lot of my kids can do it in 5 or 6 minutes eventually, because they would understand what the words would mean. And then they can write a story, opinion, or info text with self-selected weekly word or words, or create a picture with a weekly word. My kids always love doing that. I mean, some of them get done so early, they can go on Seesaw and create multiple pictures. Some of them create pictures, then write stories with it. It was always cool to see them do that. Now, if you did a word wall, that'd be a great time for some of your kids to create, pictures with the words. You can put it on your word wall. So it's a lot you can do with it. So, but as you see, the rigor goes up as you go through each stage. And then, so it's not just as simple as just, a little spelling list or just sounding out words. They actually have to use the words. But research says kids being able to decode, encode, and do all those things organically together, and then being able to interact with the word, as you were saying, with a text, being able to interact with those words, they're going to learn them, whether it's the vocabulary, being able to sound them out. Because you got to think about, when we read a word, we know what they mean most of the time. So it's a lot easier to interact with the word. But when you don't know what it means, because a lot of us have probably seen it, and I didn't even understand until I started doing more research. When kids read, you might think, the kid can sound out all the words, but it seems like their fluency isn't that good, and they're reading it kind of slow. But a lot of times it's because, as they say, meaning breaks down. They don't know what some of the words mean. So organically, because you got to think, when we're reading something and we don't know what it means, we're normally going to be like, pause for a minute and try to figure it out. We just do it faster because we're adults. So that's where that's important. So with fluency and everything, so it encompasses so much. All right.
So, real quick, on your word wall, do you just have the words on the wall, or do you have? I incorporated what I called a walking word wall this year, and basically you have the alphabet up, and I did it on my wedding cabinet, and then I had rings that had different words. Like, so I had my A words, I had my B words, I had my C words. So if the kids were asking me, you know how kids are, how do you spell yada, yada, yada? Well, it's kind of like, where you would say, like, whenever we were younger, the teacher would be like, go look it up in the dictionary.
Right.
Well, I go to the word wall and go to the C words and see if you can figure it out.
And I'm one of the bad kids. I've never been the word wall person, or had, like, I'm not maybe it's the middle teacher in me, but I'm not the big anchor chart person, all those different type of things. I guess I got a little burned my first year on kids. Sometimes they would rely on those things, but that's a whole different spiel. But I would say, and it's probably something I need to do a lot more in the future, like say on that last day or sometimes throughout the week, you have your higher babies who are a little stronger. They already know this stuff. So it's kind of, you can go through these routines, but they're just strong. They could be creating those words for the word wall. So if you have that word, you put it on that, like, as you said, the C letter or the D letter, and then you can have that up there with pictures. And it's a lot of cool techniques with that, where you can have a representation within the word. Like, it's pretty cool how some people do it. So I think that'll add a little different spice to it. And then kids can kind of see how their word study has gone throughout the year. I think that's pretty cool, because kids do tend to start, what you want to do is start getting to where those patterns are intertwined with other things that you're doing. Now let's get to what this like actually literally look like. Let me see. All right, so I've created a few documents. Still loading. All right, so I kind of broke the patterns down into how the normal progression is supposed to go, and by grade and what they're supposed to know, just through a lot of research that I have done. And so how you want the flow of it to really go, because it isn't just about teaching the pattern, it's about the progression of how kids are supposed to learn it. So first, of course, the pattern sound, you do like short vowels, or really if you're in the lower grades, you probably want to start with letter sound correspondence. That's not a word study thing, but you probably want to make sure they know that. So you start with short vowels, And you can do multiple in a week. I've done it that way. I think kids do okay with it. Just studying one word at a time, you're not even gonna be able to finish in a year if you did it that way. But you can do that in the lower grade levels because they don't need to know complex consonants and inflectional endings and all of that. Then you go to blends and digraphs. So you may go week 1, you do initial blends. Next week you do final blends, initial digraphs, final digraphs. Now maybe you can add an additional week for some of the other little like NK and all that, those different type of words. But that's what you can do for those particular weeks. And then grade 2, and you can do these all within a year, but this is where they need to know at this stage, the CVCE, which I didn't learn about maybe toward the end of the year, and then double consonants. Then you go long vowels, R control vowels, diphthongs, complex consonants, inflectional endings, prefixes, suffixes, and Greek and Latin roots. That's the product throughout the whole year. So you can spend a certain number of weeks on each one, and then you just continue to move along. Now, once you get to grades 3 and 5, those particular type of things, inflectional endings, prefixes and suffixes, and Greek and Latin roots, that's when you're gonna get more into, for one, the kids know the patterns at this point. You're gonna get into what they call the morphology, knowing what these prefixes and suffixes and these things mean. That stuff is more important at that stage. So that's what's gonna be important. Now, what I did for a visual, so let me zoom out here. So I kind of created like a little flow chart pretty much of all the things you would do within that day. So you might have your little mini lesson of whatever you're going to do for that particular week. And you may spend more than 1 week on short vowels. So you might create an additional week. You have the phonics part. What do you do there? Phonics instruction, and this probably phonological awareness. Then vocabulary. Then you can have extension exercises for every day if you want. I mean, it's just your preference. And then you create like a flow chart of what you would do that particular day. Then, so say that's short vowels. Then you have the CVC, which I need to swap with the other one. Then you have blends and digraphs. So it kind of gives you a flow of what it should look like for those particular patterns. And you can differentiate by week because you don't want to do the same activity. That's kind of boring. So you have long vowels, R control, diphthongs, which a lot of teachers, as a lot of us know, that R control is a lot harder than even a lot of us probably than it seems. And you have complex consonants or consonant clusters, inflectional endings, so on and so forth. So that's what that would look like, for that particular, the progression of what it would look like throughout a year. Now, most of these things, honestly, you can go back to it. Most times you can be done with all this by the 9 weeks, but it still follows a flow. And then throughout the year, you could be reinforcing a lot of these skills. That's how I would look for a whole year. Or you talking about the curriculum or the flow of it, that's what it would look like. All right. So that's what the progression would look like. All right. Just a sample what some type of lesson plan look like, and you can do it. And I probably would look a little different throughout the school year, but the actual words, as teachers, we got to put teaks, or we got to put, or whatever state you're in. You have your mini lesson, little words. Oh, and I did sample for, say, long eval. So you might have your little mini lesson, what you say, then you kind of have the flow of what you're going to do. So an administrator needs to look at it. These are like the little words you can say, like, oh, I'm transition to phonics instructor. Have the kids come up to the board, underline the pattern of each word. Then I just say I use voices. And then you close out the words that are routine day 1 with this. And then, so say, for example, you go ahead and go to like day 4. I call it conversations when I do my stations. I didn't steal. I gave her credit. Tremendous teacher, Emily Bino. Actually, she uses it for science. I thought it'd be excellent for what I was trying to do. So the word study routine evolved as the year went on. So as you see there, I kind of give a flow of the words you're supposed to say with it. And then here, probably won't get to it on the 4th day, but if you was to do something different, you do a concept stretch. So that's what the weekly words will incorporate with like the reading passage. So you might ask a question using one of the weekly words, but I ain't had a chance to use them yet, but I would like to. All right, that's the lesson plan. Now, this is some I didn't get a chance to use this year, but I'm gonna incorporate. I was working with younger babies, so I didn't really get as much into it because you only could do so much at a time. All right. Wait for that to pull up. And I just want to give everyone a visual of what that could look like. Slow computers. All right, so this is just a sample word study tracker. And I actually have one for a reading as well, and I'll do another webinar on that Bloom structure. All right, so word study tracker. So as you see here, the knowledge, the comprehension, application, analysis, the evaluate, all of that. So you get to kind of track as you go along. So say if you do have kids that are struggling, you'll get to start to be able to see at which stage the kids are struggling. So if you see they're not very good at applying, that's where you can be like, okay, this is where they're having troubles at, and that's where I need to remediate. So say you can go back and look at the data a couple weeks later, or whenever you decide you got to do small groups or RTI, all those things, you can see, well, not a kid. One, you need to see if it does need to be remediated, because the kid doesn't know how to evaluate and do all that. They don't supposed to know that anyway. So it's kind of like you got to think about where your time is spent. But if they can't even comprehend, if they don't even know it, that's where you need to remediate. And if you're tracking your data throughout the week, and I mean, of course, it won't look cool and do all the different components, but if a kid, 80% of your kids can't do the comprehension, hey, it might be a reteaching that you need to differentiate in some way. But if it's just a couple kids, so say, for example, if you're doing the apply and they're reading the passage and coming looking for the pattern, this is where you can pull a small group of those kids that can't comprehend. And so instead of slowing down the whole class and where you got to reteach, you can pull those couple of kids and you can work on comprehension and maybe give them the application as homework or something like that. And so you don't slow down the rest of the class. And same with analysis or any of this stuff. And if you have a co-teach, this is where they become handy and really help you with those things. And then, of course, to evaluate and all of that. Because if a kid's stuck here, like, you just going to have to remediate throughout the week. I mean, it looks cool when everybody can do it, but reality, you want to make sure those babies can do all of that. All right, so that's what the tracker would look like. So you just put 70%, 90%. Normally, this is going to probably, knowledge is going to be 100%. So I wouldn't get too caught up on it. And you can track it. I had a teammate last year, they actually could put where it meets student standards. So people that like data, that's a good thing for them. Okay, we went through the tracker, so I went through all. And then the materials, I kept it pretty simple. You don't need like a whole lot. So the books that I use, Vocabulary Magic by Joanne Billingsley. I went to her training, and I've been to a couple trainings of hers before. Tremendous educator, and I use a lot of her stuff for the vocabulary type activities. And then Word Study That Sticks by Pamela Petrakos. So I'm gonna get them a little pub. So this is the book Word Study That Sticks by Pamela Petrakos. I hope I said her name right. And then Vocabulary Magic, or actually, wrong one, Making Words Real. So I need to change that. But it's called Vocab Magic, kind of in a sense. So Making Words Real. So let me change that. I don't know why. Guys, even teachers make mistakes. Making Words Real. All right, by Joanne Billingsley. And simple resource that you can use. I find the Spectrum spelling books to be pretty good. They have stories, they have the word sorts, they have all that, and they already have the pre-made word list. You don't have to go. Now I look for some higher end words on my own, but the Spectrum spelling is a good one. The Journeys practice books only have some good little activities, and some spelling lists. And then Texas Treasure Spelling, they have some pretty good stuff too. Kind of similar to Spectrum. So those are three of the ones that I used this year. There's other ones I'm sure out there, but those are the three main ones. I found them to be pretty good. And it's a time saver where you don't have to go and spend hours on end, which I'm about to get to. All right, finally, the benefits of the Bloom Word Study. This is the core thing. Research-based. So it shows that kids being able to decode, encode, and being able to use words in multiple contexts. That is something that it helps with their reading, because instead of them just being able to do the look-say method or something like that, they know how to sound the words out, they understand the pattern, they know what the words mean. So that will help with their reading, their fluency, their overall comprehension. So it is highly research-based, and word study is considered a stronger approach than just rote spelling lists, even for spelling. It's very efficient. It can be done within 25 minutes. It is not hard. I did it all this year, and I'm a fast-paced teacher, but it can be quite efficient, especially once the kids get used to the routine. Like I said, on Mondays, maybe you could do 30 minutes. And I don't know how much, it depends on how much your school, I guess, gives you for that particular, like say phonics or something like that. But, I think if you explained it to whoever your admin is, I think they will understand. I find it to be quite engaging because as you see there isn't a lot of teacher talk. You might, other than explaining things and guiding them through, you really don't have to talk that much. They can do it on their own. Now it's time we have to give an explicit instruction, but you don't really have to talk much. They're doing the work. The differentiating is embedded. Obviously right now with COVID, we can't do a lot of the in-person teaching stuff, but you can send it home, and then when you're in school, you have auditory, tactile, kinesthetic. Kids get to move around. All of that is embedded within there. Then they get to draw. They get to do all that. All that is naturally embedded within the routine. So you don't have to think like, oh, how am I differentiating? You can literally explain it. And it might be a lot of prep in the beginning, but once you kind of get used to the routine, it's pretty easy. Like I normally type the words out and send the parents or something like that. But you easily could just print it from whatever book you're using and then give it to the kids then. But I normally type out the words and send it to the parents so they'll have it at home to practice. But for the most part, I find it to be low prep. A lot of the activities are pretty easy. Of course, you got to do some work, but I think it's worth it. It's a lot better than reading some book with a bunch of fluff in it and having to read for 3 hours for one lesson. Trust me, it's say you can do a whole week's lesson probably in an hour, if or less, really. And if you plan ahead of time, you really almost don't have to do much. And then multiple disciplines are embedded. So fluency, reading, writing, all of that is embedded within the routine. So it's not as simple as just learning the words. They do it within other things. So you're incorporating a lot of discipline, which is, if you're talking on an evaluation rubric, that's a good look. So I may have went a little fast, so I apologize. But so Kerstin, any type of feedback, and I'll leave that for people when they look at the webinar as well. What would be some feedback that you would give just looking at the routine yourself as an experienced educator?
I think that this is awesome, and I look forward to. I mean, obviously, I can't do every step because I have kinder babies this year.
Uh-huh.
But I mean, I can definitely apply some of this to my teaching and to helping them be able to master the art of reading. So
what parts of it really just stick out to you? I guess because it's still a new one for me. But I know the traditional funding method I didn't too much like myself. But what sticks out to you is, I mean, you've been teaching a lot longer than me, so I don't pretend like.
Well, yeah, but I mean, it's just basically the breaking down of every tier. Like you were going back to the blooms.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, I mean, I know that I do that during my teaching, but I don't break it down the way that you had everything broken down.
And I'll tell you, I took, and it's probably because I already was experimenting with the reading, and it took me a while to kind of understand even how to break it down there. And I felt like I was making some mistakes early on because I still was growing in my understanding of blooms, and because in a sense they tell us to do it according to blooms, but as we know, a lot of folks don't do that. So it's kind of,
well, yeah, they say to do it do it according to blooms, but they don't break it down. See, I'm very visual.
Mm-hmm.
My learning style.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm hands-on, but I have to see it first.
Mm-hmm.
And this broke down everything, so now I'll be able to incorporate it.
It's kind of like people are telling you to do stuff, but don't give you, and a lot of times, the proper tools. And that's all.
Do it, figure it out, but don't give you examples how to do it. You actually broke all this down.
And honestly, what I was trying to do is I understand how the teacher, as some of our veteran teachers have told me, you always want everything to be low prep. But you start seeing if you got to take 3-4 hours for one lesson, like, all right, you're doing too much. Like, especially if you're in the lower grades, and a lot of times in lower grades, people are self-contained. You're planning 5 different subjects. And, I never be the teacher complain about doing, I love lesson planning. Like, that's like my jam, obviously, as you see. But, like, you don't want to get it where it takes forever. Like, and I think, like, sometimes I don't think you should plan for something like phonics that's 25 minutes out of the day or 20 minutes out of the day, and you're taking 4 hours to plan one lesson. That's absurd. Like, that's inefficient. And that's why I use that word. Nobody wants to do that. But you want the stuff to be effective as well. But I don't know if you planning taking all that time to plan one lesson because you still got to teach reading, which is most of the day, your guided reading, all this stuff. So you don't want to spend all that time. You want a routine. You don't want to, something that's going to be so cumbersome. So that's something I took into account as well. And like I said, with the Blooms thing, I never pretend like I knew how to do it in the beginning, because you have to understand, you think you're doing something good, and it's really knowledge, but you're trying to do, you call it analysis. And really, you want to go through all those stages. So yes, I guess I go out of the stop sharing. I just want to thank you for joining me today, because that was a big help having another person there. You understand, I'm only in my 7th year in education, going to my 5th year as a classroom teacher, so I'm still learning these things. But I did find this to be quite effective this year, and I think it can work for all levels. And even if you're teaching in middle school or even high school, and say you're working with dyslexic babies or babies who struggle with reading, I think it'll be helpful. Then, say for somebody like you, we were talking beforehand, and you said that, or I think even while we were doing the webinar, that you didn't learn phonics until after you were in college, because what a lot of people learn, and maybe even what I don't even remember much about school, but when I was in the younger grades, but that look-say method of learning, that 3-cueing system of being able to look at the pictures and all of that, and then you don't learn phonics, so you don't know how to sound out words. So if you do it this way, you can incorporate all that, maybe not to the level you would do at the lower grades. So in the lower grades, like what you're doing, you're gonna have to break it down to the basic letters, sounds, each one of them.
Yeah.
But the thing that's great about it is something that maybe you wouldn't be able to use the word fidelity the first semester, but if your kids were to advance, maybe the second semester, maybe especially with COVID and all of that, you might can start upgrading the rigor. And of course, it looks good when administrators see your kids being able to do these cool things in the 4th 9 weeks when they're being able to use this high-end vocabulary. So maybe as the year progresses, eventually you can start using more of the higher end part of it, because the kids may have a high level understanding of diphthongs and all those things, which they can learn at that age, because people have done it. So, but it kind of gives.
Yeah, they definitely can, because the kinder, 1st grade, 2nd grade, those are the years that the kids are sponges.
Right.
I mean, saying that at the older grades that they're not spongy, but that they observe. I mean, that's why everybody says K through 2 is the fundamentals. You got to have that in order to be able to.
And it is weird, as somebody that was the upper grade teacher, I do feel I'm still more of an upper grade teacher, because I think my mindset clicks is more because of the ones who are used to dealing with the primary kids, or the kids K through 2. They're used to the behaviors, and I don't personally myself care for that, but I have a high level of understanding now of how important primary is. It's not that I didn't think they were important before, but when you're in the upper grades, all you think is star, star, star. You don't think about like this.
I'm sure that you've had those students that only I know you taught 4th grade. I don't know if you've taught 3rd grade.
No, I haven't.
But where you go in there and you have your babies that can barely read, and you're like, how in the world did they get this far up the ladder and still not be able to know the basics?
You'd be surprised. I mean, there's kids that get to high school and can't even do some of these things because they move around.
But that's where, K through 2 is where the foundation's set.
Yeah, and you get them before they develop all those bad habits, because obviously, as somebody that's taught in the upper grades, and say I taught Phil, and you have some kids that'll fail to start once, twice, maybe even 3 times if they flunked the grade, like in 3rd grade. I've had kids before they failed the grade, so they might have taken the start twice. And so you're dealing with a lot of baggage already in 5th grade. So in the early grades, they don't really have that baggage. Now I can see where some kids don't get those things. So say if they only do phonics in K through 2, and the kid has a behavior issue K through 2. And I was telling someone the other day, what I saw was that a lot of my kids that struggle with letter sound correspondence and couldn't do those things, a lot of them were behavior issues. So, I mean, it's kind of hard to learn your letters when you're too busy trying to disrupt the class. And obviously, at the primary level, kids' behaviors, or you're not dealing with just, in the older grades, sometimes kids being a little aggressive or emotional or whatever. You're dealing with some just very petulant child, like little kid stuff, or kids complaining because they can't go to like a restroom or something. Like, it's very just petty half the time. So, I mean, not for them because they're younger, but you deal with other set of behaviors that come along with it. Before this, I guess this webinar has gone on a little bit. And at this point, me and Kerstin are just talking. I wanted to just thank you for joining me today, Kerstin. And I know I'm doing something else with an intervention model and maybe some other things I would like you to join in possibly, but I just want to thank those that are listening, probably the 8 people that are listening on YouTube once I post it. because I'm just not starting now. There'll probably be 8 people, but maybe they'll think it's awesome and they'll inquire about it. So I just want to thank you for joining in. And
Well, thank you for inviting me, and I'll definitely
yes,
look forward to seeing more,
yes,
sharing more.
yes. We all got to collaborate and work together as teachers. Not about the competition aspect where people are trying to be the best and steal people's stuff, as we know other teachers do sometimes. So. But I just want to thank you, Kerstin, and I guess I'll sign out now. Thank you. Be phenomenal, everybody.